Our journey begins. It is day 108, September 16, 2024. It is a beautiful morning. I just saw a shooting star. The moon is nowhere to be found, and there are so many stars out in the sky. Orion's Belt, the Big Dipper. It's just beautiful. The crickets chirping, the perfect 54-degree weather. It's beautiful. So I wanted to do this voice journal check-in to kind of say, what am I talking about? I realize I think occasionally I'll be going full steam ahead, and the concepts that I'm talking about are cool. Like, you talk about one concept and the other concept, but then how they fit together and the holistic weaving together of all these concepts and how they're actually going to make a difference or how they're actually going to matter. Sometimes I have to end up doing this sort of thing where I regroup, say how everything fits together and how I'm actually going to make it happen and whatnot for myself. And also, if, let's say, that I were to perish, at least I would have put out there this idea that I have, and then maybe someday an AI or person will find it and make the idea happen. Not because the idea itself is necessarily universe altering, but because if there's the chance that it is, at least it's out there for people to find. All right, so it's one of those things where it's also then difficult to start. But in general, we have a couple. I'm going to outline the main concepts, which is probably like 20. I'm going to use different words or titles for those concepts. And then I'll probably give a brief description of each one, and then we'll go from there. So, the first concept, OCC, which I'm not exactly sure. At the time, I was thinking, oh, it should be called a secret project, and I'll codename it OCC. But I don't think anyone is going to steal my idea, and if they do, I welcome it. That's sort of the whole deal, is that when you're thinking about things from the stance of coordination rather than competition, it doesn't really matter if someone steals your thing, because if someone stole my ideas here to create what I'm thinking of creating, then I would be absolutely thrilled. So the OCC stands for the 1 Cent Club, which in short was this idea where, what if 1 cent could change your life? Sort of helping people to live intentionally, providing lots and lots of value through this overall ecosystem that helps people to live the best version of their lives. And it's only 1 cent because that's just a small amount of value that comes back to me. People would pay for it in quarterly segments, so they would pay like 92 cents per quarter, and then they would get a daily announcement every day being like, hey, you spent 1 cent today in an attempt to try to be more intentional about life. Now, every other cent you spend today, every other minute you spend today, it's in the details. Every thought that you have, it all adds up, and you should be intentional about things. But yeah, basically it would be like you would set a goal for the 90 days, and then you would get an accountability group and set up a smart contract, and you had to have co-signers to start the contract, co-signers to finish the contract, and then once you've completed a goal, a self-improvement goal, which you would have help with through the whole ecosystem of the 1 Cent Club, then you would get like some credits, which would essentially be added to your tree growth. You'd have this like fractal tree growth that would represent your identity. and your growth over time. So yeah, thought about that for the last several weeks. All right, so that's one concept. Another concept is the movement coordinating mechanism, which is sort of the machine that coordinates, allows for the coordination of large groups of people and small groups of people to work toward making the world the best place possible. And in general, transitioning the world away from something of competition towards something of mutual coordination, which I know sounds a little bit like socialism, but is not. So this would be sort of the machine that would make the movement happen. So the movement is another concept, which is a very generic term for essentially the way by which the force or the way by which the world does become the best place possible. In the sense where like the coordination mechanism is sort of the mechanism, the movement is sort of the overall force where it's constantly evolving toward like it's constantly evolving to point in the direction that is actually best possible future, and then constantly reevaluating how it's traveling there, and very likely will involve many people working together. And then the movement sort of encapsulates more of the ideas and constitution and a lot of the other ideas that I've been working through about how you would make that force happen. So the movement inspiration movie is another thing where it's a big part of the movement, where it's once you have laid out the Constitution, you've built the coordinating mechanism, you need a way to truly inspire people to really live the best version of their lives and to really seek for the best version of the world. And so that would be a movie which I've outlined, I've sort of recorded, like if someone were telling this story, I've recorded that, but I would really like to make it into an epic movie and sort of help inspire that. Then you have another idea is the Choice book, which is literally basically the exact same thing, and in a sort of inspirational and mind altering book, completely and entirely personalized to your life, showing you what your future could look like in different scenarios, based on your personal desires. Like what do you imagine the best world possible to be, and what do you imagine the worst world possible to be, and do you have a lot of cognitive biases in there that we could reveal to you? And so that book, I spent a lot of time in the past working through how that would all work, and I had it all outlined, but that would involve some sense of needing a framework and detailed personal profiles and high level thinking AI and world building knowledge graphs and all sorts of stuff. Another concept is the movement original constitution, which is a way to organize the original ideas, because in general the movement is going to be something that self-evolves into always pointing toward the best possible future and always traveling there in the best way possible, where best in both of those definitions is defined in its best way possible, where you're taking into account how everyone thinks about things and logic, reason, and you're just taking into account everything. Um, so the original Constitution is sort of the original step. Like, obviously, any Constitution that you write one time and then say, "Oh, this is the Constitution for the next as long as this entity exists." Obviously, that's not what I'm going for. I'm going for an ever evolving Constitution, and I think that's even sort of in that original Constitution outline. But anyway, it sort of outlines like, okay, let's say we could just write like an epic, perfect sort of Constitution now. Like instead of worrying about what what the United States Constitution or whatever is, trying to figure out if that's correct. You just think, okay, if I could start from scratch, what would it be? And I guess that is sort of the way I think. Sort of say like, let's start from scratch. Let's rethink this whole thing. Another concept would be self-organizing and self-evolving movement. So it's sort of part of the definition of the movement, but sort of that idea of where things auto-orient themselves and organize themselves into their best possible formation in a sort of decentralized fashion, where you don't have this hierarchical control over what you're doing, but you can just put lots of effort into whatever great thing you'd like to accomplish, and that can be coordinated so that it's synergistic with other people's efforts. So that is a concept. Of course, there are a couple other key concepts within the whole idea of the movement, which I could outline briefly. It's just basically what's in the what's currently in the movement movie, which, and I might get these a little bit out of order, but the first step would be realizing or sort of that our brains have cognitive biases, and realizing that we have to have an open mind. That's sort of step one. Step two is, once you're open to really seeing the truth, is really looking for the truth and seeing all the problems in the world and just getting a general state of the perception of reality. And then once you have that perception of reality, you start thinking, what are the possible ways to bring about, or like what do you do at that point, basically? And the general sense is, well, there's varying things, but the deal is that we really don't know. We know there's all these problems. The best world probably involved, or like we might as well shoot for the best possible world. And that world probably involves the getting rid of all of those problems in reality and shooting for things which are beyond our imagination even. And there's also like a realization of, well, like maybe humanity sort of needs to evolve a little bit. Humanity's nature, because a lot of times the reason that humans repeat themselves is because they have human nature, which is repeatable. And if we could evolve a little bit past that to where we're not controlled by that anymore, I think as long as what we have is better than human nature, then I think that could be positive. You also wonder, well, like human nature is evolutionary and that's how we survive. But I think now most people are controlled not by nature, they're controlled by the artificial nature that humans have created, their own world. And it's not so, and so you don't necessarily need to. So yeah, if you're going to create a different world, then for humans to live and operate in, then you need to evolve the human nature a little bit to live in and do stuff in that world. Anyway, so oh yeah, and there's also like the step of like, okay, just a little bit of depression, like, okay, is there anything that anyone can do about this? Like, what do we do? Like, maybe we help the things, maybe we don't. And then you sort of get to the choice where you either decide, or you either sort of let the world happen, try to do some positive things in your life, basically try to live for yourself, sort of let things happen, just sort of decide that the best possible future obviously isn't going to happen anytime soon. Like, there's no point in trying. Or there's the no compromises, the choice, where you decide, I'm going to literally try my hardest, do everything that I possibly can to bring about the best possible future. Um, so, yeah, the choice. And then and then you start realizing, well, okay, how could we solve these problems? Well, any one person, it would be difficult for any one person to solve all the problems. It would be difficult for like a few people to solve the problems. Maybe a really smart AI could solve all the problems. But essentially, you get to this like temporary step of like, well, however we're solving the problems, we would like that way to be the best way. And then you're sort of like, okay, well, maybe a way of formulating that into a concept is by saying, we'd like to create a movement where we're always working toward the best possible future in the best possible way. And however that looks, then you're flexible, able to adapt. Then you sort of get into explaining more what the movement would be and how you could have a movement that does that sort of thing. And that's where you get into the self-organizing aspects and into aspects of like what daily life would be like. And then, I mean, also sort of envisioning the best possible future and seeing what that would be like and working through challenges. And and then also in there is this concept of the movement genesis, which is essentially, I'm writing the original Constitution. I've been writing through all these concepts, but I don't really know everything, obviously. And in order to really make this happen, you would need a group or a team of people that are interested in this sort of thing. Like I said, I can get it started, but really, truly making it happen is going to be that team of people, which is where you get to this aspect of the movement genesis, which is the start of the movement, where we take my initial stuff and then morph it into what the team thinks and sort of try out ideas, do some alpha testing and whatnot. So that's a lot of the ideas around the movement. And I explained the 1 Cent Club and the choice book, which the choice book is essentially would be part of the movement, like a later, like after the movement genesis, once you've established that you have this coordination mechanism working, then you're ready for the world to join you. Then you would really start creating inspirational stuff, and that's where the choice book would fit in there. Um, so those are some concepts. Now, another concept that I've thought of for okay, well, yeah, there's lots of other concepts, but like what's important for explaining this? Uh, so the One Cent Club and all of the movement. Well, okay, so basically I'm at the stage where I've worked out most of the beginning constitution part, but now I really need to build that coordinating mechanism. That's the main thing that needs to happen. And I sort of thought that I was shifting directions a little bit by thinking through the One Cent Club, but really the One Cent Club will just be one aspect of the movement coordinating mechanism. So then we're sort of at the stages of like building out the One Cent Club slash coordinating mechanism slash general movement ecosystem. That's basically what the stage we're at. But the deal is that the movement coordination mechanism, which is essentially building out the ecosystem, or the One Cent Club ecosystem, is literally a rewriting of everything. It's rewriting that human designed create world that we live in. So yeah, we live in a mixture right now, the natural world and the human designed world. But the human designed world was designed by people in the past and people with the past human nature, people with competitive things. So like all of the structures of economy and everything are built on this structure of competition, survival of the fittest. When really, that's not actually how. That's very likely not how we're going to reach the best possible future. And of course, this gets into philosophy, but very unlikely. Certainly possible, and I think in some ways you would obviously still maintain competition in some aspects, but you shouldn't have to compete for who gets to live the best life possible. Like obviously you should be coordinating that to ensure that everyone can live the best life possible. But yeah, so those are some of the concepts. Now let's drill into specifically the movement coordination mechanism that I've been thinking through. I thought through that a lot yesterday. And it's basically the same thing as the One Cent Club ecosystem. So they're basically interchangeable. But I think the movement coordination mechanism is probably the right term to use for this. The One Cent Club, I think, could be just like a part of that. So you would, in this ecosystem, generally would allow for people to live the best possible life that they could live and allow for them to help create a world that is the best possible world. Which you could say, well, like that's already you can already do that. And it's like, yeah, kind of. You can go make a bunch of money and live a nice life. But how are you making that money? You're probably making it in the capitalistic system where you're basically taking advantage of the situation that you were born into, or even if you weren't. So let's say that you were born on a farm and you were sort of enabled to continue farming. Like, I understand that farming is a lot of work and you're creating food for people, but in reality, people don't really want to have to pay for their food. So you're not really doing them a favor. Um, yeah, people need food, but they need food to survive. It's not like they're like thrilled to have to pay for their food. Um, and then there would be other people that would be glad to do the farm, but they weren't born into a family that had land, or they weren't born into a family that had any money. But then you have the group of people that didn't have any money and built their own empire. Well, that empire was built on what? And I think this is probably exactly the qualm that like Karl Marx and whatnot probably were coming up with. Like, basically, you're just taking advantage of other people. That's how it works. You're just taking advantage of other people. I just realized that probably is exactly the same thing. And that's why a lot of people still are interested in those philosophies, because they're like, yeah, capitalism is sort of this thing where you're basically just taking advantage of people. Like, you pick anything, basically anything that people build a business on, make money, and can live their best life, or supposedly best life, but really they're taking advantage of people. So let's take, obviously, stuff like Pepsi. A lot of people are making a lot of money from Pepsi and Coke and sodas. But obviously those liquids are really really hurting people. Like, first of all, those liquids are literally hurting people, and then like shortening their lives. So you really don't care about people. Um, but then you're also just basically taking money from people that want to buy something to drink. And of course, you could say, well, the people don't need to buy the thing, but they want to, and then you might as well make a little bit of profit off of that. And to me, that's not coordination. Like, you're not going to get to the best possible world by doing things like that. And I think that's I don't think I've explained that properly, but I think there are a lot of people who will understand it, if not now, in the future, once I've built the coordinating mechanism of like, what is the difference between a system where you can coordinate and a system where you're just completely. But yeah, I mean, in the capitalist system, it's very difficult to live the best possible life without taking advantage of other people. Like, it's very difficult to both make the world the best possible place and live your best possible life in the systems that we have in place today. Very, very difficult, if not impossible. And that's where the main concept of the coordinating mechanism is is to build a system, an ecosystem, where you have the ability to do that. So what would that include? Basically, it would in its basic form, it would be an ecosystem, meaning there's a holistic sense of need of systems where everything is addressed within this ecosystem. There's nothing that you have to get from outside the ecosystem. It is completely it can be completely self-contained, and it can also interact with the world around it. But that it allows people within it and people that are outside of it who would like to join it to literally live their best life. and to make the world the best possible place. And you're probably a little bit annoyed at how many times I say that terminology. Maybe there's a shorter way to say that. I'm not sure. Um, so what does that mean? Well, I've definitely thought through the whole ecosystem idea many, many times. The whole enlightened ethical businesses ecosystem, which is essentially exactly what I thought through all of that a lot. But I think instead of enlightened ethical businesses, you do like coordination mechanisms or coordinating functionalities that operate within the the coordinating mechanism and within the ecosystem. And again, it is just so beautiful out here. Beautiful fresh air, the very early morning light, the breeze, the crickets and whatnot. It's just beautiful. But um, these would be functionalities. So this would be a holistic ecosystem. But I guess the main principle is that this ecosystem is a different way of structuring humanity's designed reality. Because obviously like I said, we live in half of human nature, half humanity, uh, humanity architected society and life. And right now, like, if you were to live your happiest life, it's a mixture where you're mostly living in nature and a little bit living in like the best parts of that human designed uh, structure. It seems that way, at least. And but like, yeah, one of the problems in reality is that that nature part is being destroyed by the humanity architected structures. And so either way, it seems to me that we need to re-architect the humanity created architectures and structures that we live in. That is just what it seems like. We need to evolve. Humanity's structures need to evolve, and humanity itself, its nature, should evolve. Both. Both should evolve to like the best things possible. And that doesn't mean that we need to like do gene therapy or something. It just means we need to enlighten our consciousness and like create a physical world that allows for the best possible future. So that's going to involve, so basically this whole ecosystem, and just a couple of the main ideas that I have so far are sort of the following, is that it will sort of be built on this idea of Web 3.0, or which is essentially a decentralized future where, and I'm also trying to tie in these ideas of AI into this whole methodology and thinking. And so, but yeah, okay, so there's various parts of the ecosystem. The one is the sort of accountability aspects of helping you to live more intentionally and accountable to yourself and potentially other people, because that alone can drastically better people's lives and better the outcome of their lives, is by helping people to sort of, instead of being distracted by all of the distractions in the world, all of that human architected structures that distract people, like social medias and the bad parts of the internet and um, and like drugs and alcohol and like, so many different things. Um, sort of helping people to not get distracted by that. And that's where the one, and that would sort of be the 1 cent club. Then you have, and so, and you would also have this aspect of being able to connect with people in a true sense. Like right now, even though we live in a high tech society, it's hard to find people that actually think the way you do, that actually care about the things that you do. Um, it is a bit difficult. And that's where I think we can build something much better that allows people to connect with people. Then you have like the whole restructuring of the way society, a lot of that, a lot of the way we currently operate, which of course you could say, oh, like we just need to go back to the way things were, like when you would grow your own garden basically and tend a field or whatever. And I think an easy an easy way to say that's not necessarily ideal is is just by saying like, yes, there are definitely good parts of that, and definitely the best possible future will probably involve decentralized everything, including everyone basically having their own garden. But there's also like, maybe that's not exactly what it'll look like, and I think saying, oh, we just need to go back to where you have you each have your own garden is probably not necessarily the most ideal. And I mean, I can think of a few reasons that's not the most ideal. Probably other people can as well. But even if that is, like, sure, that's great, that's fine. But in the meantime, so this is where you get to the stage of like, at any given point, the way that you're working toward the best possible future is going to be a little bit different, because it's going to depend on the current situation. And if the current situation is that most people do not have their own land, then you're not likely to say, okay, the solution is take everyone's land from them, split it up into little pieces, give it to everyone else. That would be sort of what socialism and communism tried to do, which was, of course, they did some other things which weren't ideal, but that's what they tried to do, and that doesn't really make sense, because and even then they didn't even give people individual stuff. They just said, okay, it's everyone's thing, and you do your part in it, and it just, I'm sure you would get a sense of belonging in that, but you would not get that sense of freedom and of pursuit of happiness sort of deal. Um, and so I think a more likely outcome would be that you would say, okay, let's, instead of every farmer creating stuff that goes to a thing way down the road or across the state and then gets processed and then gets shipped down a few other states and then gets processed again into some specific junk food that then gets shipped many states to your home. Like, instead of that, just doing more of a farm to table situation where it's all coordinated within the coordinating mechanisms, and farmers themselves begin to do this because it's beneficial. Farmers that want to do it begin to do it because they care about living their best life and helping the world to become the best place possible. Obviously, if a person only cares about themselves, they're probably see, this is a tricky point. Human nature isn't going to change unless you actively change it yourself. So if all you care about is yourself and whatnot, then it's going to be very difficult. Then like no one else can say, hey, you should care about someone else. Like you're just going to always think that the best thing to do is to make a lot of money for yourself and whatever. But it is also possible that that's not going to matter, that as long as you have enough people together that do care about other people, then you can at least create within that ecosystem. You can create that positive aspects. And I think that's probably how it's going to work out, is that the overall ecosystem is going to be there. And as long as that's there, it's fine. If you're outside of that ecosystem, sort of working in the traditional senses, it's probably not going to be ideal. You're going to realize that you're way less happy and that you're a little bit selfish and all that. Yeah. Basically, you have farm to table. You have knowledge bases where like you shift the world from this competitive, oh, like I'm gonna research this, I'm gonna research that. We're gonna hold this knowledge in order and get funding to research this knowledge in order to potentially make out big time in the long run. Where instead you would sort of open source knowledge, and at least knowledge that we already have, you would open source that and organize it really, really well. And that would allow people to build things that are really, really impressive. Especially as likely in the future, it's going to be AI that's going to be able to take all that knowledge and create magnificent things. You would want the AI to have all the knowledge. You wouldn't want to have to research, like double the research or triple the research that you have to do that someone else already did, just because they have it within their whatever. And then of course it'd be like forums and knowledge sharing, the ability to discuss really important ideas and about these topics. You would have the ability to help coordinate that better world in the sense of thinking through and envisioning what the best possible world is, how to get there, sort of really actually working on those topics. It would probably involve physical living situations where people can coordinate how they live and they can begin to live and eat and everything sort of with this internal economy, which is like significantly less fiscal monetary value compared to what the way it currently is. And so you wouldn't have to work to get by. You could do things that you enjoy doing or do things that benefit other people and like learning new skills. And that would basically be enough for you to survive within the ecosystem and live. And because everyone's coordinating things, you could have a high standard of living that is actually beneficial. Like, obviously, having a bunch of Lamborghinis is not a high standard of living. That is a selfish pursuit of egotistical enlightenment or something. But it's certainly not true happiness. And I think you could look up any psychology on the fact, and they would say that's not true happiness. So yeah, like that's not what I'm saying. But you can still have a high standard of living in the sense that you're connected with people that actually care about you and that actually are intelligent, and you could be really, really healthy because everyone's coordinating to be really healthy, and you could exercise and sort of, yeah, the health and fitness thing is going to be a major aspect where you can have the ability to coordinate those things. And in general, personalized self-development in a deep, deep sense, personalized entertainment, personalized everything. And so, yeah, obviously you can probably guess all the different components of an ecosystem. It's basically everything. It's like, okay, designing robots and the robot economy and like, yeah, 3D world building, virtual reality creating, like all of these aspects. There's so many. Like basically the ecosystem would be everything, but you'd be doing it from a first principle standpoint of thinking about it from the lens of coordination rather than competition, and how it should actually work rather than how it currently does. So then you sort of have, okay, how are we going to make it happen? How are we going to, what's going to be the framework on what that everything that all of this is going to rest on, and how am I specifically going to start building this? And so that is, I'm going to briefly start touching on that, but it's a very difficult topic, obviously. So at least I think the framework will involve at least the following, which will be decentralized blockchain technologies with DAOs or DOAs, and um, detailed individual profiles of people that are highly, highly detailed, that everyone owns, and it's that they are the sole owner of those profiles. But then they can allow certain different things to have smart contract access in order to create really personalized aspects, and sort of highlight like really amazing knowledge graphs that sort of allow all this knowledge to be formulated in certain ways and can be ever evolving, and so you can change the way you interact with this data, but essentially it's organizing the data in a really high level sense. And that goes back to one other concept that I've been thinking of, which is the La Vita tapestry, which I thought a lot about how to create that sort of thing. So that's obviously a very high level overview of how to create this coordinating mechanism. But then you get into, okay, how am I specifically? Well, what am I going to actually do? And that is where we get into, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep at it, even when it seems like I should be doing some shorter term thing. I'm going to keep at it to do the right thing, the no compromises right thing. And that doesn't mean that I have to do it all myself, and then at the very end, we can pull things together. It could mean that I start by doing the most important things first and creating the most important functionalities. And then from there, things can sort of self-evolve, and you can have millions of people helping to build all the other parts of it. So, but yeah, I think it will. So if we're rewriting how the human constructed reality is and how it functions, that's going to include a rewriting of a lot of things. And I just think it's better that way, to do first principles, start from the bottom, work your way up. than like trying to reuse all the old systems. So I think a basic beginning point is human language. Right now it's ambiguous and you have to learn many different types of languages for many different reasons. And it's not really sophisticated enough or clear enough, or yeah, where like coding language, obviously you wouldn't speak in coding language, but it's very concise and clear. So you need to be able to put that into a naturally spoken language. So I think I'm going to start by recreating language. Probably just do it in English, but like recreate how it works a little bit and developing a bigger vocabulary and whatnot. And hopefully making things better. I don't know. And then once I have that, then I can start to rebuild how coding works. And then once you can sort of code in this non-ambiguous natural language, and you can have compilers and all the other layers that work, then you can begin to code things much simpler. And probably as I'm doing this, I will build in the capability for AI to make things happen. Sort of, I don't know, I haven't really fleshed this out, but right now when AI codes, it takes your natural language and it's like, okay, this is the sentiment of that. Let's convert it to code. And so it converts it to code. It's often not a perfect representation of what you would want it to code out. But it can code what it's seen before, but it can't code anything new, really. I mean, it can code recombinations of things that it's seen, and it can sort of guess at what it thinks it should see. Um, so, but yeah, I think once you have that natural language, then every part of that natural language can become something that runs operations. That typically you'd have like a certain function does a certain thing in the code. But with this natural language based coding, the natural language itself is something of functions and stating different things and how the code will actually work. So that right there could take years. But I think once I get to that point, then I can build anything I want. And then we can rebuild lots of other functionalities. But yeah, then you can start to build like the whole blockchain functionalities, the whole encryption mechanisms, the whole decentralized coordinating mechanisms. But I guess I guess I'll say it's not necessarily necessary that I'll have to rewrite human language. Maybe I'll just end up having to learn how code works and just coding and reusing all of the other systems that are currently out there. But I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be better for me to go from the ground up. But well, we'll see. Anyway, so that's been an overview. Obviously, not completely entirely holistic, but definitely a big sense of what I'm thinking right now. And I think I think I'm setting myself up to fail because this is like impossibly hard and whatnot. But again, if I can try to think about things as doing the high functionality things first, then things can sort of compound and grow exponentially toward fulfilling all the things. It is nice to just have like so many ideas for what I want to do. Like, it's nice that that's not the issue. The issue is just being able to make them happen. So, all right, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.